We continue as a country to call for the AU and the UN and to work with them to find long-lasting peace in Sudan. We do so through various means, both at the diplomatic track and also at multilateral platform. While the media glare is on the Russia-Ukraine war, the genocide in Palestine, the conflict in Sudan, the war in the Eastern DRC, and the conflicts in the Sahel are as good as footnotes. We have to take up our responsibility as Africans to help end these wars. We should work with those external and internal friends who act with bona fideness to end the war. This, admittedly, is not an easy task. It's not easy because the presence of unconventional participants on both sides, including mercenaries, foreign volunteers, special forces, paramilitary squads, has made Africa a place for proxy war. And this is more pronounced in Sudan. It's one of the most complex conflicts we have ever seen in modern history, which makes it more difficult to find a solution. But it also means that we need to evolve with these changing dynamics in global affairs to be able to resolve this conflict. We have to put all our creative might also to be at the same power and pace with this ongoing conflict, for us to be able to resolve and respond, particularly for the people of Sudan, the children and women in Sudan. It is easier now to fund wars than to fund development. Wars' geopolitical characters also involves economics, financial and cyber warfare, artificial intelligence, which have become weaponized and used on a massive scale, with propaganda, fake news, and other intervening products of artificial intelligence and the new cyber warfare. This is the scale at which we now also have as countries and also as multilateral institutions have to be able to respond to this evolving dynamic in geopolitics. Ironically, the Russian-Ukraine war and the immediate pre-COVID global landscapes were accompanied by some hope for progressive internationalism and enhanced international cooperation. Africa wanted to become a greater priority and looking forward to the world community looking for new modalities to address post-pandemic recovery. Alas, it was not to be, and optimism was quickly replaced by pessimism and outright alarm. Interdependence is now marked by competition and tension. Rising military tension, disruptive trade and commercial relations, growing protectionism and right-wing populism, grave environmental degradation, the abuse of hard and soft forms of cyber power, and an increasing levels of bigotry, racism and tribalism are replacing the gaps and vacuums left in the wake of these rivals. The Middle East crisis is becoming a proverbial shift in the global balance of power in front of our eyes. What started off as a plausible evidence of genocide against the people of Palestine is now transforming into a real regional war that will have long-lasting ramifications for global peace and the economy. And Africa, like all wars, will be the mostly affected. Those who have criticized South Africa for its decisions to take Israel to the ICJ and join in actions in the ICC are now coming around 1 year later to agree with us on the warnings we have signaled before. This shows that it was only that the wrong person from the global south raised the issue. If it was maybe someone from the global north, the response could have been different. The emergence of BRICS and the BRICS Plus is real. Differences amongst BRICS members notwithstanding, BRICS is determined to play this counterbalancing role for the development of the global south, to find an alternative platform for developmental finance that will enable us to fund our infrastructure developments, our real challenges, issues of climate change, and a number of issues that impact the global south. We are very glad as South Africa that the BRICS Bank, or what is called the Development Banks of BRICS, has granted a loan of $1 billion to help us with our water crisis. This shows that alternative sources of funding as a counterbalance can be found in the BRICS platforms, and these can be aggregately used by the global south. After the 2023 expansion, especially to the members of the NEMA region, BRICS is a real force to be reckoned with. We will ensure that it does not take its eyes off the peaceful settlements of disputes, the transformation of global multilateral institutions, development finance, and the agitation for a more equitable global order. A fundamental feature of contemporary global order is the erosion of multilateralism, notably the UN and the multiplying weaknesses of institutionalized mechanisms. Established norms of global governance are also being eroded and corroded on. Multilateral cooperation and adherence to international law will move us away from the Hobbesian-like world that is zero-sum politics. Standing behind and championing the Pact of the Future is about the survival of multilateralism. It is in our interest to do so if we are to pursue the just global order. We will carry the implementation of the Pact of the Future because of our future depends on it. The 2-decade impasse of the Doha Development Round in the World Trade Organization has damaged the promise of deeper integration of developing countries into the global trading system. The failure to reform the UN Security Council and the strengthening the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, as well as the unilateral withdrawals from the Paris Agreement, all point to a weakening global society and order. Empty promises defer development and reform. As you may already know, South Africa will assume the G20 presidency from Brazil on the 1st of December 2024. President Ramaphosa has already announced that the theme for our presidency will be solidarity, cooperation, and sustainable development. We believe that this will be a significant moment in our young democracy. This will be our biggest national project after the World Cup and the national collective efforts to fight COVID-19. We plan to prioritize discussion on the just energy transition, financing for development, transforming global financial structures, infrastructure development, and other important issues, including artificial intelligence, food security, and the debt trap that many countries in the global south are in. Implementation of Agenda 2063 of the AU and the implementation of the Pact of the Future. We have to reverse the uneven distribution of resources for just transition. It is inconceivable that Africa only receives less than 3%, in particular the global south, of the global climate change financing, while being the most affected continent and part of the world by climate change. We will advocate for more resources to be allocated to the global south and also to the Africa for climate change. Who would have thought that in the middle of KwaZulu-Natal, in spring, there will be a snow. We now know that this is real, and I think that is what the Prof was referring to, that the future that we used to theorize about is now with us. The reality and the effects of climate change are with us, and sub-Saharan Africa is mostly affected. Most parts of Southern Africa has got this huge challenge. Malawi is heavily affected. Even substance farmers are confused of seasons now. They don't know when to farm and not when to farm, which affects us the most. So the financing for climate change must be proportionate to these realities and respond to this emerging challenge for the African continent. It is important to remember that despite these challenges, there is a hope for positive change. The impact for geopolitical rivalries and wars extends beyond sanctions and disruptions to supply chains, but African countries have an opportunity to reclaim their agency in world affairs. By insisting on genuine partnership and aligning agreements with regional groupings and continental programs, Africa can lead the way in defining its engagement with major global powers. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area presents a significant opportunity to increase intra-Africa trade, which is currently at 17%, and foster economic growth. And this can also be improved at the most regional integrated part of the African continent, which is SADC. Trade here is also very low. I think it's at about 27%. We hope that the Africa Free Trade Area can help us increase this level of trade at the SADC level, but also in the entirety of the African continent. Africa has great potential to shape its own future and create a more prosperous and interconnected continent. As we choose to industrialize and reindustrialize our economies on the continent, we must bear in mind that this is us who can give the world a more human face, a Steve Biko injunction. One of the most raging debates that Africa will have to lead soon is the issue of critical minerals. The UN General Assembly has adopted a report from the UN Secretary General on critical minerals. The AU will be adopting its own strategy on critical minerals later this year or early next year in the Leaders Summit. This is a very important document for Africa because we cannot be left behind again in the wave of natural resources, where the continent becomes an extracting site and not a place for value addition and for industrialization, also for our own local manufacturing. We have been left behind in the previous revolutions with regards to natural resources. Africa has to be in the tipping front of the current discussion and lead the engagement on natural resources, particularly critical minerals that are aimed to power issues of artificial intelligence, electric vehicles, and the new economies, because we are the most endowed continent with these minerals, yet we remain an extractive site. Our generation has to change this by ensuring that the adoption of the strategy position Africa as a center of knowledge, of capability, and as a point of reference in terms of how critical minerals should be used to benefit its own society. The looming spectre of geopolitical rivals will cast a dark shadow over the people of Africa and the South, and indeed the entire world. The relentless march of inequality, violence, division, and disillusionment is creating a tragic reality for the people of Africa, plunging them into areas have never been seen before, in particular in Sudan and in the eastern part of the DRC and the Sahel. But we have an opportunity to change this through coordinated efforts at multilateral level and partnerships. And we see this platform as important in shaping our thinking, our future, and our research capabilities as we move forward. I want to conclude by embracing the African concept with regards to African solutions for Africans' problems, leaning towards also the global South and finding long-lasting solutions to these challenges that the world is facing. Thank you very much.